Hi, I'm George Pearson, and in this Photoshop Elements video, we'll be doing this image kind of like a watercolor, somewhat, but it's going to be combining two pictures, this flower picture right here, and this hummingbird picture, and ending up with this nice art style image. Okay, to begin this one, we'll have a brand new file, so I'll just close this down, get that out of the way. Get that out of the way as well. And File, New, Blank File. I'll leave this at the default Photoshop Elements size, 6x4, resolution of 300, and choose OK. There you go. You can come in docked, that's just fine. Alright, and we'll start off now first by setting up a brush. We'll be using a special brush for part of this, special paintbrush. So click on Paintbrush over here, and come down where it says Brush, just open that up, and up here, little drop down list, come down to Natural Brushes 2, there it is, and then if you scroll down, it's a long ways down here, but as you get down towards the bottom, you have some of these things in here. These are watercolor brushes, and what they are is they're black and white, and they have a little bit of a gradient built into them. If I bring up one of these and then make it real large, and let's click once like that, there you go. Kind of see the idea. It comes with a very gradient and some dark edges and so forth. Kind of has a watercolor effect to it. Okay, let's just undo that. Now I want to have just a couple of options on this one. First, I'll set this at about 130 to start. We'll be adjusting the size as we go just for some variations. I also want to have some built-in variations on this. So for that, click on Brush Settings. And in here, we'll leave the hue jitter alone. We're using this primarily on the layer mask, so you want to have it just straight black and white, no hue jitter. I want to have a bit of scattering though. And that's going to be giving us some randomness. If you look down here, this is a sample brush stroke. If I pull in some scattering, notice how it begins to scatter that brush stroke down there. So that's a good idea to have some of that in here. I'll bring it up to about 18% or so. Nice amount of scattering. Again, that just builds in some randomness so that it's a bit more uneven and it doesn't look as if you're just using a stamp the whole time. We also want to be changing the angle. Unfortunately, though, there isn't any random setting to adjust the angle, so we'll adjust this manually. Then just close that down. All right, that's all set. Let's now start with setting up our background. And for the background, the first thing I want to do is to put in our background color and texture. So click over here on the color picker right there, foreground color. There is the color picker. And then type in for the color here. Just select the hexadecimal right down there. And what you want is FEFBE5. There it is. It's just a light tan color. And then choose OK. Grab the paint bucket, click inside. It just fills it with that light tan. Alright, now we're going to apply an effect onto this. In case I want to adjust that later, I'm going to make a copy of this layer. Right click and duplicate layer, choose OK. That's because sometimes the effect may not look exactly right. I can then go back to the original background with the color on it and reapply a different effect. That's just kind of a safety for us. So here's our background copy. Go up to Filter, come down to Filter Gallery right here. Click on that. And in here, let's just close that down. Come down to Texture, it's your bottom option here, and Texturizer. And here you want to have the sandstone texture right there. It says scaling at 200% and the relief at 6. The light angle doesn't really matter. As you can see, it doesn't really change how it looks. I'll normally be doing top left again, but it doesn't really matter in here. And choose OK. And there we go, kind of just a nice little rough texture. Looks reminiscent of watercolor paper. It's not exact, but it looks reminiscent, and that's all we're doing here on this image, is giving an effect that's kind of like a watercolor painting. Okay, now we can bring in the flower. So down to the photo bin. Now these two images down here, you can find links for these on my website. I have a link for that in the description. Click on the flower image first, and I'm just floating this window, make this easy. If you don't have floating windows activated, just go up to the Edit menu, come down here to Preferences and General. Right there, first page, you want to have this checkbox checked, Allow Floating Documents in Expert Mode, and choose OK. Then all you have to do is just grab the background, drag it over here, and there you go. You brought that picture in. Now it's not quite in the right place. I want it flipped around and up in the upper left-hand corner. So for the flip, I'm going to hold the Control key down and tap the T, so it's Control T. That brings up the Transform dialog box down here, and where it says degrees, set this at -150. And that spins it around exactly like that. We can now position that up here, upper left-hand corner. Somewhere around here is pretty good. And hit that green check mark to set that in place. Let's now bring the bird in. I'm just going to hide this layer. We'll bring the bird in. Same thing, I have the bird open here in the photo bin. And I'll just drag that in like that. There we go. Now the bird is a little bit too large. I want him a bit smaller than this. Same thing again, the Control-T keyboard shortcut. This time down here at the width and height, make sure that constraint proportions is checked. Set it at 82% and that copies it over here. Makes the bird just a little bit smaller and hit that green check mark. Okay, and then put it right about here so it's kind of centered in the picture and the wing is just beginning to go off on the right hand side. That's a pretty good spot. Let's now make copies of the two layers here. First the bird layer. I'm going to rename this layer bird so you can keep track of things, and rename this layer flower. There we are. On the bird layer, right click and duplicate layer. Choose OK, and then hide the original. Same thing on the flower layer. Let's just show it for a second. Right click, duplicate layer, choose OK, and hide the original. I'll pull the bird original now down above that flower original as well, and just keep those hidden. Those are my safeties, just in case we mess things up again. I'll just come back to those and grab those. All right, now on our bird copy layer up here, I want to make a selection cutting out the background from the bird. Now it's kind of hard because all this stuff back here, this is just the wings flapping back and forth, getting a blur in there. And same thing down here at the tail. The tail's moving a bit, getting a bit of a blur in here. I want to get rid of most of that blur and have a bit better selection over in here. We'll do that pretty easily. Go over here to the selection tools and come down to the quick selection. Make sure that you're on new selection right there, first option. I have my size set at 13 pixels, and then starting right here near the tip of the beak, just pull straight down the beak like that, and then we can go back and forth a little bit in here and get the body and that claw right there, get that in there, and then pull up along right up along the top of that wing and pull it up until it all of a sudden grabs a whole lot of the background, and it's right there. And then pull down the wing here and then pull along the body and get a bit of that tail right there. Okay, so it's good for the front half, and then we have all this excess stuff on the back half. We can remove that easily enough. Just switch over here to the lasso tool and have your setting at subtract. My feathering is at 1 pixel, which is fine. And we're going to simply remove that stuff. Come out here someplace and then come in like that, and right where it kind of cuts into the wing, grab that spot and then make a new freehand selection right around the wing. It doesn't need to be exact. It can be out just a little bit, that's fine. And freehand down along the tail like this, around the bottom, and then out the outside and back to the beginning again. And that just removes all of that stuff. And that's all we need right there. There's our basic selection. Now I want to remove this background, so let's invert the selection. Go up to select, come down to inverse right there. It's now outside. Look for that marching ants outside there, and then just hit the delete key, and that deletes that outside of that selection, and then we can deselect. Okay, that's now been taken care of. I'm going to hide that flower again, and we'll focus on the bird. We're going to be having several layers of birds here for different effects. This first one is a really blurred layer. So let's go ahead and set in that blur on this one. Go up to Filter, come down to Blur, and Gaussian Blur. There it is. And I have mine set at 38 pixels. You can see it's just a real blurry, that's why it wasn't that critical on the backhand side there. Real blurry kind of an effect in there. And then choose OK. I'm seeing a little bit of blue over here on the right hand side. We had a little bit of that in there. We can clean that out with an erasing tool. Go up here, grab the eraser, and then I'll set the brush here to a standard brush, again, default brushes, and just a large, I'll do a large hard edge and bring the size up. That's pretty good, 77 pixels on that bird copy layer. And just come in here and erase anything that's in there that you don't want. But there we go. That takes care of that. Cleans up that edge. Okay, here's our basic bird background layer. Now we need to have 3 more copies of the bird layer above this layer. So is this layer right here, this bird, let's just hide that just temporarily. So right click on this, duplicate layer, choose OK, pull that above. Same thing, duplicate layer, choose OK, pull that clear to the top. And then one more, right click, duplicate layer, choose OK, and pull that to the top. All right, let's now hide all of these birds. We'll get back to those in just a bit. And that one. Let's show our flower copy layer. Select this layer so it's the active layer. There we go. and then come down to the selection tools again. Make sure that you're on new selection, and we're still on size 13 pixels. And then make a selection for the flower. Doesn't matter where you start, just start someplace and begin selecting the different parts of the flower in here. If you miss a little bit, that's okay. We can fix that once we have the basic flower selected. And just work through and get the whole flower selected in here. There we go, down this part. Get down this part right here. Let's get this bit back in here and a little bit right in there. All right, now switch over here to subtract and come back in and get the inner parts that shouldn't have been selected, and just come through and grab those. Again, this doesn't need to be perfect. Now if it does this, if it takes out too much, you'll have to bring down your settings here a little bit so it doesn't grab quite as much as you do this. Let's make the brush size half this. I'll just set this at 7, and we're still on subtract. So I'll work in here and right there. That's pretty good. Go back to add and bring back in anything which was accidentally removed just then. So you're kind of working back and forth, as you can see here, until you get just the parts that you want selected. And that's pretty good. If there's a little bit off, that's okay. It's not going to be that critical on this. You can come in and just kind of tap in here, maybe clean it up just a little bit. It's going to be going blurry as we've seen before, so that's fine. All right, there's our basic selection for the flower. We now need to invert this selection. So select inverse. Make sure you see the marching ants around the outside of the picture, and then hit the delete key. And that leaves just the flower, and then deselect. And just like we did before, we're going to blur this out. So filter, Gaussian Blur. Now the very top line up here is going to be your last used filter. So in that case, click this and it applies that filter for us. Just saves us some time right there. Okay, there's our blurry flower. Let's now hide that one, and we'll go back to the birds. Bring in the bird copy and then bring the next layer up above that one. And we'll now work on this layer right here. It says bird copy 2. For this one, we're going to be applying an effect to this and then hiding the whole picture and bringing back in some of this with a layer mask. So effect is first. Let's go up here to filter, come down to Filter Gallery, and in here let's close down that texture, open up artistic, and come down to Paint Daubs. It's right there. And the setting you want in here is brush size of 38, sharpness of 0, and brush type is wide blurry. And choose OK. That just kind of does that to that picture. Okay, now we're going to put a layer mask on this layer, and that's the layer mask button right there. Just comes in as white. Let's change that. Make sure you're on the layer mask side. You should be, but double check, look for that light blue outline. That's good. Make sure your foreground color is black. Grab the paint bucket and just click in here, and that fills that with black. So there we go, there's our layer mask. Now if we reverse our colors to white, we can use a paintbrush and then paint in here and bring back some of that image by painting in. And this is where our watercolor brush comes in. Again, we're on the layer mask side. I'm painting with white. I'm using that watercolor brush that we did. And if I just paint in here, notice how it comes in as just little kind of spots in here. And then just paint just about like this. Just do a little bit of painting like that and let it be a bit random. That's fine. We'll be doing some adjustments on this later. And all you want to do is just bring in some color like that. If it's a bit too large, you can come down. You can adjust your brush settings in here, change your angle maybe a bit like that. You can change your brush size a little bit and then do a bit more. So it doesn't look like it's too much the same. You want just kind of a random effect. And there we go. That looks real nice. Now it's a bit rough on the edges out here. Let's just clean that up. We're still on the layer mask. And let's just change our brush in here. I'm going to change back to a default brush. And let's set this at a soft edge brush. Actually, I'll come down here, maybe like a soft edge 65. That's pretty good. And then invert your colors. You want black in the foreground. And then come in and just kind of paint in like this and get rid of anything that's sticking out just too far and is a little too rough. And just do a quick pass just around the edge of the bird here. It doesn't need to be real clean. Again, we want to have a little bit of roughness showing on this one. It makes it look more natural. You want to get anything that's really sticking out much too far. Okay, there we go. Now, let's go back to the bird copy down here. On this one, let's come down and reset your colors. Click on that little reset color button right there. Click on the layer mask. Brings in a white layer mask. That's what you want this time. You want to have a black paintbrush color. Come back down to your brush And let's reset this for that Natural Brushes watercolor brush. And again, that's down just a little ways down here. You'll see it right there. Any of these brushes is fine. I'll just stick with that top one. Let's put the size back to about 130. And then using a black brush on that white layer mask, come in and just kind of tap around the edges a little bit. What I'm doing is I'm roughening up that blurred edge out there. And then every so often come in and adjust your angle just a bit. And go back over the same thing so it looks a bit more random. There we go, a little bit more like that. Come in and just kind of roughen up that edge. So we still have that gradient happening, but we're now roughening up that edge, and it looks a bit more like paint has been coming in and spreading out naturally. Okay, that looks pretty good. I think I'm happy with that. Okay, now we're going to be repeating the exact same thing on the flower layer, and that's right down here. So first thing we need to have are 4 more flower layers. You just bring that up. If you want to, you can hide the bird layers right now. Let's now show the original flower layer right there. Right click and duplicate layer. Choose OK. So now move this one above this flower copy layer. Just pull it straight up. There we go. We can hide that one and we're done with that now. Now on this, let's just duplicate this 2 more times. Right click and duplicate layer. Choose OK. And then 1 more time on that. Duplicate layer and choose OK. Okay, now we'll be doing the same steps on this that we did on these layers up here. And the first one, of course, is the paint daubs on this layer here. Let's go ahead and set that up. Filter, Filter Gallery, and in here, let's find the paint daubs. They're right there. There we go. And I have this set at brush size 38, sharpness 0, Y blurry. These settings should have stayed in place from the last time you used this. Choose OK, and there it is. And again, just like before, we'll put a layer mask on this layer. Click on the layer mask button. There we are. Let's go back over here, set your foreground background colors to black in the foreground, grab the paint bucket, make sure you're inside the layer mask, look for the light blue outline, and then fill that with black. And back to our paintbrush. We still should have this brush set up here. I'm going to bring this back up to the 130 pixels for that. And just come in here and we're painting on here in white, so set this to white. There we go. And let's come in here and just do a little bit of clicking around and a bit of painting, some clicking, just bringing in some of this imagery in here. Again, exactly the same thing that we did over on the bird layer. Just do a little bit of this. Doesn't need to be completely filled in, just a little bit. We want to bring in some of this basic coloration and have some of the these nice kind of rough edges show in here. You may want to occasionally switch the angle. Maybe adjust your size a little bit as well, just sort of some variation on this so it doesn't look exactly the same every single time. And I'll come down to the end a little bit down there. There we go. And a little bit over in here. And that's pretty good, just a messy little bit like that. It's pretty nice. All right, now let's clean up that edge. Again, it's exactly the same thing that we did before. Do a little more right in here to find the front edge of that one petal. There we go. Okay, to clean the edge up, you want to have black. And let's reset our brush back to the default brushes. Then we'll find that 65 soft edge brush again, which is right there. There we go. And then again, you're on the layer mask on black, painting with black, and just come in and clean up the edges a little bit in here. Don't do too much. A lot of that soft edge is going to be from the blurred layer. So just a little bit of cleanup in here, and then we'll go back and mess up that edge of that blurred layer as well. Again, the exact same steps that we did previously for the bird image. Okay, looks pretty good. Let's now go back down to the flower layer here. This is our blurred layer, and we want a layer mask on here, so choose layer mask. You want this one in white, that's correct. And you want to keep your foreground background colors in black. Switch back over to our natural brushes too, and scroll down for that watercolor brush. There we go. I'll bring that size back up again. I'll bring it up to about 120 this time. Just vary the size a little bit as you go. And come in and just click along the edges in here. Just kind of randomly. We're just breaking up the edge and getting rid of some of that fuzziness out there. We just want to have a rough edge. There we go. And come in, adjust your angle a little bit. So again, it's not looking exactly the same everywhere. A little bit up in here, a little bit down here. Adjust the angle some more. And a little more. Just breaking up the soft fuzzy edge and getting some of this kind of a painted effect in here. A bit of a splattered effect almost. You're looking for that roughness showing up in there. And it doesn't need to be real exact or real perfect. We'll be adding in more stuff as we go. and just keep on making little adjustments in here and cleaning up that edge. Okay, that's looking pretty good now. Most of that fuzzy edge is now been removed. Let's do a cleanup on this one. Once again, that's back to the default brushes, and scroll down and find that 65 brush again. That's right there. There it is. And clean up some of the stuff that's further out. Don't go in too far. You want to keep that kind of a rough edge. But anything that's outside here, you can come in and clean some of that stuff out. That's no longer necessary. Okay, so just finish this up and clean this one layer up. There we go. It looks pretty good. So now I have these two layers on the flower and matching two layers on the birds. We can now move on to the next layer up here. Let's now hide the flower layers and we'll move up to our next bird layer. So bring in the two that we've already done. Bring in the next bird layer up here. And we'll now apply a new effect here on this bird layer. For this one, go back up to Filter, come down to Filter Gallery. Once again, it's the second one down there. And here you want to come down to the sponge effect, and that's that one right there. Now the settings on the sponge effect, brush size of 10, definition of 0, and smoothness of 15. Choose OK. And there it is. Notice that it's more detailed than the last one, but it's still a little bit blurred out, and that's perfect. Once again, add a new layer mask to this layer. You should still be on black. If not, just set black as your foreground color. Grab the paint bucket and fill that layer mask with black. Go up to your paintbrush, invert those layers so you have white in the foreground, and then come down and find that natural brush again. Natural brush is 2. Scroll down and grab your watercolor brush. There it is. I'll set this one at 100 this time, so we're a little bit closer in. Check our brush settings. Make sure our scatter is still in here. I'll do it 15%. And then just come in and click around right in the middle of the bird this time, up around the head here. Maybe a little bit along the beak, a little more, like that, up around the head, up on the front edge of the wing. There we go. I don't want to have this too detailed yet. You can come down and get a bit of the body in here. Now it's going off the edge. We'll clean that up in just a moment. A little bit in the tail, and maybe right along in here, a little bit of this part of the wing. We're just bringing in a little bit more detail at this point. Okay, it's looking pretty good. Let's now switch our brush over and reverse the color. So reverse the colors first, black in the foreground, and we'll go back again to that default brush. Scroll down to that 65. There it is. You're still in the layer mask, and let's now come in and just clean up that edge a little bit. We got a little bit of that new stuff coming out, so we just clean this up. In this case, you can be in a little bit closer on your cleanup because we have some of that other stuff from the previous layers showing through, which is correct. Okay, it's looking pretty good right there. Now the exact same thing on the flower layer right here. Let's go ahead, I'll just hide the bird layers. There we go. Back to our flower layers, show the 1 layer, 2 layer, 3 layer right here. Same trick. This one gets that same effect, so up to Filter. And with the top one this time, this just repeats your last effect. There we go, and that saves us some time. There it is. Put in our layer mask. There we go. Fill the layer mask with black. And then once again, go back up to your paintbrush, switch our colors to white, change the brush in here down to that natural brushes 2, scroll down to the watercolor brush. See how we're going just back and forth and repeating the same steps over and over again. Let's double check. Let's set our size at 100. Check our brush settings. You may need to put scatter back in again. Sometimes that drops out. Check your spacing. That's just fine. And this time come right down the middle of the petals. Don't worry about the edges. Just come right down the middle. Now I'm just clicking in here. I'm not painting. I'm just clicking. And that puts that scattering effect. And if you paint, you lose some of that scattering effect. It also looks a bit too regular. I'm going to bring this out just a bit further out towards the end here. A bit more of that petal shape. We have some of our other part of our flower showing up over in here. We'll follow those through. Again, I'm just clicking, just tapping on my mouse button right now and allowing it to just fill in a little bit, but not too much, and staying mostly towards the center, and just a little bit of the edges on some of these more obvious ones, but just a bit more towards the center and not too much on the edges. Just bringing back in a bit of that color. Okay, that looks good. Let's now switch our colors again, black in the foreground, and switch our brushes back into our default brushes, back down to the 65. Again, just repeating these steps in here. There's a 65, and painting with black, come in and just clean up those edges anywhere where that's come out. Now this can go in pretty tight because I don't really care about it going over the edge too much, so right around the edges in here, just removing some of that spill that came out. There we go. I'm going really fast on this. Doesn't need to be perfect or exact. We're just adding in a bit of detail. Okay. That one's done. Let's now hide the flowers, show all the bird layers this time, including the top layer. Now on our top layer up here, we're not applying any effect to this layer. Let's put a new layer mask on it. We still have black in the foreground. Grab the paint bucket, fill that just like before. Back to our paintbrush. We're on the layer mask. Change your color to white. Back to our natural brushes 2. Scroll down. Let's find our watercolor brush. There we go. I'll leave it at 49 pixels this time. Let's come in and scattering. I'm going to set scattering just a bit lower, about halfway down, about 7 this time. And same thing, I just want to come in and just click in here, just tapping, because now we're putting in the actual bird image. This is the actual photograph. I'm just bringing in some of that photograph. So this will be real tight, a lot of detail in here. We'll find that upper edge of the beak. We'll clean up that edge in just a bit. Get the upper edge of the head up in here. Because we're bringing in a lot of detail, you don't want to go too much on the edges or too much in the middle there. You don't want too much of this pure detail or it begins looking like a photograph. We just want to have it just in spots, mostly right in this middle section in here. A little bit of the top of the wing right in there. A little bit in the middle of the main muscle part of the wing up here. Maybe just a little bit, little brush strokes in there. Just a touch, not too much. Just bring in a little bit of that detail. And there we go. Maybe a little bit right down in here with the feathers towards the bottom edge. Again, I'm just tapping. I want to make sure that we're just getting some spots in here and not pinning it in solid. Okay, back to the black brush. Back to our default brushes. Back to that 65. Make sure we stay on default. There we are. Back to our 65 brush. Scroll down. There it is. And once again, just cleaning up the edges in here. We got out just a bit too far on that. Make sure you don't come in too far and begin to lose your detail in there. I'll keep those detailed that we put in. So just a little ways in, and that looks pretty good. I think that's looking real nice. Okay, the bird is now done. Let's hide the bird. Bring all the flower layers back up again. Top flower layer, layer mask, fill that with black just like before. Change back to our paintbrush. Change back to the watercolor brush. So our natural brushes 2. Scroll down. Let's find that one and we'll finish off. There it is. Leave it at 49. Brush settings, again, set the scatter here at 7. And just right in the middle area on this one, make sure we're on white. There we go. White in the foreground. And get the little bits that you may have missed before. Maybe find the edges of the flower petals here, the front edge. Just tapping and just doing a little bit here, not too much on this. I'll bring some of those details in. Just a few little details, very light this time, not really going too far on this, just bringing just a few of those edges, give us a bit of definition. That's looking pretty good, a little bit right up in here, maybe down on one side of this leaf over here. There we go. Okay, and that looks pretty good. All right, that takes care of the flower. Take a fast peek. Looks good, I'm happy with that. Okay, now next little trick. Let's hide all of the layers except for these 4 flower layers. So hide the background down there. So just these 4 flower layers showing on a clear background. Now a special keyboard shortcut is the Control-Shift-Alt and then tap the E key. What that does is it copies all these layers, merges these onto a new layer right here. Take this layer, pull it straight down so it's the bottom of this one stack of flowers in here. Change the opacity on this one down to 80%. I'll just type that in. Go up here to the Move tool and make sure that you're not on Auto Select layer. Make sure that that's not checked. There you go, and then just kind of push that back up here a little bit and over a little bit. I'm seeing a little bit of an edge right down here. You kind of see that edge right there. Let's clean that out with the eraser tool. There we go, I'll just erase that out. Depending upon how you did everything else, this may need to be in a little different position. That was pretty good right there. I think I kind of like that. Just kind of fills in that area back there. All right, let's bring the background back in again. Let's bring our birds back in again. Almost finished. One last little trick in here. Go in here to the top layer right there. Top flower layer. Click on your foreground background color picker. You get this eyedropper. Come in here and click in the dark section here until you see a purple chosen right there. So we're choosing a purple out of that petal and choose OK. So our foreground is now purple. Now come down here to graphics, and in graphics set this at shapes. And if you scroll down, you'll find some big kind of splotchy square things. There we go. Just below that, we have this thing here of some drops. Click on that, and it gives you these kind of paint splatters. Let's go back to our layers, and that comes in right here. Move this layer to the very top, and then take that and put it over here on top of the wing, just about like that. Somewhere in here, doesn't need to be exact, just kind of around in here on top of the wing. And we're now going to adjust the blend on this one come down to soft light, and that just blends those drops in. It's a little bit of a cheat, but just a couple little paint drops gives it a bit more of a sense of this being a watercolor painting right there. And there it is. We're done. A lot of steps, but they're repeated over and over again. Basic step-through process, and gives you this nice kind of a pseudo watercolor effect here inside of Photoshop Elements. And if you had fun with this project, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to click on share and subscribe as well. And to really learn how to use Photoshop Elements, take a look at my complete training course, and there's a link for that right down there in the description. All right, and I'll see you next time.